Another day, another drama, another affluent Kazakh men abusing their wives. Hello everyone and welcome back to According to Addy. And today we will talk about the case of Karina Mamash, who was a wife of ex-Kazakh consular in UAE. And this Kazakh diplomat has been abusing his wife for 10 years. And this case honestly is so freaking crazy. So without further ado, let's get into it. Karina Mamash met her husband when she was only 15 years old and her husband was 32. And this is so freaking creepy. Like, I literally have no words. Why a 32-year-old would be talking to a 15-year-old? This is borderline pure in my opinion, because what can they even have in common? According to Karina, they met online and she says that on her online profile, they could see her real age. And so there is no excuse that maybe her husband thought that she was older. Karina says that she lost her father when she was only 9 years old, and this obviously had a huge impact on her. She says because of that, she was looking for a father figure in a man. So therefore, when she met her husband, their age gap didn't really worry her. She was actually very happy about it. She thought that her husband would be more mature, more, experienced in life, and he would be able to take care of her. But unfortunately, this wouldn't be the case. So Karina said that they began talking online when she was 15 years old, and everything went well, and her husband was really into her. He even came to visit her twice, and this is where it gets a bit weird for me personally, because Karina's mom met him. Now, a lot of people were giving shit to Karina's mother for allowing her 15-year-old daughter to date a 32-year-old man, and honestly, I do agree with them. However, Karina says that her mom did warn her not to be with this man. She was very uncomfortable with their age gap, but Karina says that she was really in love with him, so there was nothing her mom could do or say to stop her. So they've been dating since she was only 15 years old, and when she was 17 years old, this is when they got married. And it's also kind of weird for me because they got married at 17, but in Kazakhstan you can only marry after you're 18, so I'm not sure if they got married in Russia. Anyway, Karina says that in the beginning, while they were dating, she had a lot of different opportunities in life. She is professional athlete and she was doing some modeling on the side, and she said that she was getting some contracts to model in Japan. She also got some acting roles, and this really annoyed her husband because he felt like if she would go to Japan and model or shoot a movie, then she would just meet somebody else and leave him. And because of this, Karina wasn't able to really do what she wanted to do. Instead, right after graduating from high school, she ended up marrying this guy, and at the time he was already a diplomat and he was living, I think, in Belgium. So this is where they move after they got married, and immediately Karina gets pregnant with their son. Karina says that the abuse in their relationship began right away, even on their first wedding night. And mind you, Karina was only 17 years old and she was a virgin. Her husband had, I guess, certain sexual expectations for her, and this was, I guess, really traumatizing, like I can only imagine. And she says that her husband had an, bad alcohol addiction. I don't know if we could qualify it as an addiction, but he would drink a lot and he would get very physical with her. At some point, when Karina was pregnant with their first baby, he would end up beating her while she was pregnant, which then, in her opinion, affected their son because he now has certain disabilities. And honestly, this is a very terrible place to be in because Karina married this guy when she was only 17 years old. She never went to university and she never had any work experience. She never worked throughout their marriage. She was just a stay-at-home mom. And because of that, she never had any of her own money. So I guess this was also one of the reasons why she was staying with him and enduring this abuse for so long. Karina said that she never told her family what she was going through because she didn't want them to worry for her. She says that everyone has their own problems in life and she just didn't want to break her mother's heart. So she just chose to share it with some of her girlfriends. She said that sometimes after he would beat her up, she would take pictures of her bruises, send it to her girlfriends, and then immediately delete the chat so that her husband wouldn't find out about it. Also, she says that her husband had a habit of taking her phone away and reading her conversations. He would even sometimes take away the jewelry that he gave her. And again, she mentions that he would withhold money from her, and this was just a routine in their marriage. And on top of that, he would constantly cheat on her. Karina suspects that her husband had an affair with his colleague's wife, which is just fucking disgusting. But other than that, he was cheating on her with a bunch of other women. And she even found out that he would send these women money and they would reply with a kiss emoji, which is so gross. This is the same guy who was withholding money from his wife and his kids, which is just absolutely gross. Karina says that on one occasion, her husband returned from a work trip and he told her that as a gift or a souvenir, he brought her a new pose. And I think we can all understand what he meant by this, and this is absolutely disgusting. Karina said that she never wanted to have sex with her husband because their marriage was a fucking mess, but this never stopped her husband from essaying her. And she said that, every time that he would do this to her, she would just, take a shower, cry, throw up. It was just so heartbreaking and traumatic for her, which I can, my heart really breaks for her because I can only imagine being married to somebody who's 17 years older than you, who is physically, financially, and sexually abusive towards you, and then having to stay with him because you don't have any money of your own, you don't have a career, and, like a lot of women, she said that she tried her best to stay for the sake of her children because she said that he was never violent with the kids, and because of his position as a diplomat, his kids were able to go to a very good school, and this was one of the reasons why she always tried to stay with him, which is honestly really heartbreaking. I'm pretty sure if Karina had her own source of income, her own money, she would have left them a long time ago. But unfortunately, she knew that she wouldn't be able to give the same kind of life to her kids that her husband is able to provide for them, which is honestly pretty sad. When asked if her husband had anything in common with Bishimbayev, Karina said no. Unlike Bishimbayev, her husband was a self-made man. He was born into a poor family. He had 8 siblings and his father passed away when he was only 3 years old. So therefore, her husband had to study really hard to get on his own 2 feet and to look after his family. So once he became a diplomat and began earning a decent living, he always made sure to take care of his family. Now, like I said, he comes from a very big family of 9 kids, but only 3 of them are alive now. So he would always transfer money to his siblings. He would help them buy apartments. If it was like somebody's wedding, he would pay for the entire thing. Like, it was really important for him to look after his family, which I get it. It is very honorable of him. He was probably the only person in his family who really made it in life, so he felt like he wanted to help them. But this came at the expense of his own kids and his wife. This guy, when it comes to his wife and kids, is so cheap, it is beyond belief. In one of the interviews, Karina shared a story of how when they were living in Kazakhstan, she needed to get some paperwork done. Now, mind you, Karina is from Russia. She's a Russian citizen, so she had to go back to Russia. Now, you would think her diplomat husband would buy her a plane ticket to ensure that his wife could comfortably travel to Russia, get all the work done, and return to Kazakhstan. But oh no, this guy, he got her a bus ticket. And honestly, this is so embarrassing for him. Like, dude, you literally have enough money to buy her a plane ticket, but you got her a bus ticket to go to Russia. Oh my god. And that trip was probably so fucking long. I can't even imagine. Anyway, she gets to Russia, but the paperwork takes more time than she anticipated. So she tells her husband that she might have to stay in Russia for longer. And he tells her, okay, fine, get it done and come back whenever it's over. She gets it done, returns to Kazakhstan, and she said when she came back, her husband was infuriated. He began interrogating her, asking her where she was, what was she doing, who she was with. And she told him that it's the paperwork that took her so long. She wasn't with anybody, but he didn't believe her. So he ended up violently beating her up. And then he went through her phone, ensured that there was nothing suspicious going on. And did he apologize for this? No, he just moved on. So this guy is a fucking creep and a cheapskate. But if you think that this is the worst of it, you're wrong. Remember how Karina said that when she was pregnant with their first baby, he beat her up, and she thinks that this caused her baby to have certain disabilities. And they went to a lot of doctors, they saw a lot of professionals when they were living in Belgium, and they found one treatment, and it would cost around $30,000 at the time. But her husband was literally too cheap to pay for his kid's treatment. And he, according to her at least, he said that he didn't believe in this treatment. He thought it would be a waste of money. And in his eyes, he thought that his kid is fine, but it's clearly not the case. And right now, Karina is trying to raise money for her kid's treatment in the future, which is honestly, I cannot even believe this guy. Like, he has money for everybody, family members, hookers, friends. But when it comes to the people who are supposed to be the closest people to him, his wife and his kids, he's like, nope, he doesn't care to spend any money on them. And this is honestly really gross on his part. So after enduring all of this abuse for 10 long years, why did she finally decide to leave him now? Karina decided that she finally had enough when her husband beat up her sister. So Karina's sister flew to Dubai to visit her, but right before she arrived, Karina and her husband had a very big fight. Her husband ended up brutally beating her up. He then proceeded to take away her phone and all of her jewelry. So when Karina's sister arrives and she sees what happened to her sister, this obviously doesn't sit well with her, so she confronts her husband. Now, her husband is like, she is my wife and I do with her what I please. You shouldn't meddle in this. And for whatever reason, as he says this, he decides to slap Karina. And obviously, this was like really shocking. Karina's sister then gets her phone and she tries to take a video of what's going on so that later they can, go to the police. But as soon as Karina's husband sees this, he begins beating up her sister. Like, this guy, I can't even believe him. He then tells them that he can beat up Karina, he can beat up her sister, and nothing's gonna happen to him. Nobody's gonna do anything. So this is when Karina and her sister decide to run out of the apartment. They run to one of Karina's neighbors' houses, and this is where her sister tells Karina that there's no way she can return to this guy. He is literally a dangerous person. But Karina, she was very hesitant. She said that she at first wanted to go back just for the sake of her children, because at the time kids were in the apartment with her husband, and her biggest fear was that if she was to divorce him, if she was to leave UAE, her husband would keep the kids. But I guess luckily for her, all of this happened around the time the trial against Bishimbayev was going on, so there were a lot of conversations about domestic abuse in Kazakhstan. So she decided to come forward. She made a video on Instagram saying that her diplomat husband has been beating her and sexually abusing her for 10 years, and this garnered so much attention, and because of that her husband had to give the kids to Karina. So Karina, her sister, and the kids returned to Kazakhstan, and her husband thankfully was fired from his job, and right now there are 2 trials against him. So her sister pressed charges against her husband, but her sister is also Russian, so I don't know if this is going to be a court in Kazakhstan or in Russia. It's not clear. And also, Karina herself is pressing charges against her husband for abusing her for all these years. And honestly, at first I thought that I would cover this case after the trial was over, but I don't know if it's gonna be over anytime soon, and it's not an open trial the way Bishimbaev's trial was, so I don't even know if we will find out what will happen to him. But I really hope that Karina can get justice. Her husband is a huge creep. I mean, he was talking to a 15-year-old girl, and mind you, maybe at first he thought that she was older, but once he found out that she was only 15, this didn't stop him from pursuing her. And then he immediately, once he married her, began being abusive towards her. He would cheat on her constantly. He would sexually abuse her. He made this poor woman go through hell. And for that, I really hope that he will get his punishment. And this should be a lesson to all Kazakh men. I swear to God, it's just so unbelievable. Especially, I think a lot of people out there, myself included, we had this sort of idea that domestic violence is something that happens only maybe in poor families, only men who are uneducated or poor, bottom of the barrel kind of men do this. But Bishimbaev's case really proved that there are a lot of rich, affluent men out there, very educated men who abuse their wives. And domestic abuse, it's not something that only happens in families, it can happen to anybody. So that is it for me today, and I'll see you next time.